Good morning, family of believers. Here we are again in front of the VBS backdrop because I'm recording this before I leave, but glad to be with you. Pastor Ben here. We're looking at 40 days of prayer and what does it look like to have our prayer life be shaped by Scripture and by the Lord Himself, especially during these rocky times of COVID as we're on this rocky railway, even though VBS is over. And this week you're looking at praying to be neighborly. What does it look like to intentionally build your prayer life around praying for your heart in approaching your love and care for others, being neighborly? Whether it's your immediate neighbor, like your family, or whether it's your immediate neighbor in a bigger sense in terms of your next door neighbors, or your street, or your community, or your church, or your country, or even as we live our lives as global citizens, right? We are fellow human beings, brothers and sisters across the globe, all sharing that common DNA. So what does it look like to pray to be neighborly? And the text that we're looking at for today is Proverbs chapter 14, verse 31. This is where it says this: "Whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but whoever is kind to the needy honors God." Wow, that's tough. That's tough, especially today in this highly politicized and polarized context that we live and exist in. Just to say, hey, God, take my heart, shape my heart, not by my politics, but by your word. And this is a tough word. If we are showing contempt for those who are poor, those who are needy, if we are acknowledging them with our lips, or saying, as James says, go with peace and be full, but we don't actually acknowledge the physical component to their need, we don't know, we don't recognize, we are actually showing contempt for our maker, for their maker. Why? I mean, we're all made in the image of God, each and every person. So when there is a need, how do we fill it? And how? That's a great question. I'm not saying that there's a pat, easy answer for every situation, but when there's a need, that's our question. How do we fill it? Not, do we fill it? Not do we care? How? How do we care? And that's so important. And in taking this into consideration as we're thinking about our prayer life, and it's something that I struggle with too. But to say, Lord, you need to prepare my heart. You need to take my heart and you need to shape my heart, because left to myself, I'm gonna show contempt for you. Left to myself, I'm gonna look out at people and I'm gonna think, some deserve it, some don't, and I'm gonna look at whether they're worthy, and I'm gonna be judging based on my own criteria and my own categories, and I'm gonna struggle. And we need God to step in and say, hey, when I look at you, I didn't do that. When I look out at you and I see people who have become my enemy for whatever reason in our own sin and pride, I actually came and went into that sin and dirt and muck, and I took on human flesh. And even though my beautiful and wonderful creation has fallen and is now putting itself at odds with me in their own sin, I'm gonna die for them. I love them so much. I'm gonna reach out and care for them. I'm gonna undergo suffering, and I'm going to have all of the weight of sin placed upon me in Jesus Christ for me. If that's the way God looks at me, how can I look at others? How can I pray for others? And that's why I think later in Scripture, Paul, he talks about praying for those, even for those who are outside the church, as praying with tears. And I include this type of thing in there, to pray for someone with tears recognizing, hey, they may be both a victim and also a perpetrator all at the same time. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. For the Christian, it's seeing other people through the lens of Christ, through the lens of God, in loving kindness and in mercy, not in contempt, either for God or for them as people. So pray for your heart here. That's what we're really after. We're not saying pray for the needy or your neighbors. We're saying pray for your heart that opens your heart up to your neighbors and to those who are in need, and one that demonstrates the heart of God, that cares for those who are in need and fills a need and is always giving. Praying for you. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.